Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good evening. You're with me, Dr. Husni Mohd Amin, Senior Research Officer at IKIM Center for Science and Environment Studies, or short as KIAS. Following this program, Great Works of the Muslim World, produced by Maslina Ismail on Radio IKIM. Alhamdulillah, for this episode, we'll be deliberating on yet another great works in the Muslim world, on the topic of al-Mabsut, al-Sarakhsi's commentary on jurisprudence. Today we are joined by Dr. Mohd Hilmi Ramli, Senior Lecturer at Raja Zari Sofia Center for Advanced Studies on Islam, Science and Civilization, RZS CASIS, University of Technology Malaysia, UTM. So I would very much like to welcome Dr. Hilmi on board our show.
Alhamdulillah, thank you Dr. Husni and Sister Mas for inviting me. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And then as an expert on legal matters. So Dr. Hilmi, your CV says here that you completed your PhD on the issue of mukallaf and ahliyah. Maybe you can deliberate a bit on those terms to our listeners, which is based on At-Tatazani's Usulul Fiqh, work on Usulul Fiqh called Al-Talwih ala Tawdih fi Usulul Fiqh. So with regards to those terms and this work, how would you describe your field of expertise?
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Thank you again, Dr. Husni and Sister Mas for inviting me. It is indeed a great honor to be featured in this program. Well, I'm not saying that I'm an expert, Husni, but I'm still a student of knowledge. That's why I did my PhD and I'm still learning. So just briefly about what I did in my PhD, it was I studied the concept of mukallaf and taklif, and also syasu itibariyah, because I want to understand the nature of discussion of legal person in Islam. Because today's many scholars, they have been studied about this concept, but for some reason I couldn't find any study has been done to understand the philosophical underpins that concept. So that's why I found in the work of Tatazani, for example, he discussed thoroughly about the nature of mukallaf, the nature of not syasyah itibariyah or legal person per se, but what constitute the mukallaf. So that's why I found that Tatazani's exposition on the component of mukallaf is quite thorough and profound, because he incorporates the philosophical, theological, and also Sharia arguments in a very coherent and harmonious way. So that's why I pursue my PhD, to study after Tazmini's works. Yeah, that's me.
Right. So going into our topic, Dr. Hilmi, what could you tell us more about Al-Sarakhsi? Wasn't he called Al-Immah? I mean, there's a term that you use for him rather than the usual Al-Imam, and also maybe you could deliberate some on his background.
Okay, thank you, Husni, for inviting me to talk about Imam Sarakhsi. I think his name, Imam Sarakhsi, is actually not quite well known among the society here in Malaysia, because we Muslims here, we generally practice our ibadah mainly according to school of Imam al-Shafi'i. But among the scholars, among the jurists in the academia, I'm sure they know Imam Sarakhsi, because they encounter Imam Sarakhsi's name when they do their study, especially because they do comparative legal school of thought. So I think that's the position of Imam Sarakhsi in our society today. I encounter Imam Sarakhsi because I read one of the works by Professor Sabri Orman, who is known as the late Professor Sabri Orman. He is known as the historian of the Islamic economic thought. He produced 2 extensive articles on the sources of the history of Islamic economic thought. In the article, Professor Sabri Orman argues that Imam Sarakhsi's work, especially al-Mabsut, contain quite an enormous discussion on the epistemic framework of the history of Islamic economic thoughts. Not only that, he also, found that Imam Sarakhsi's work al-Mabsut contain thorough and great analysis of what we call an economic analysis. So that's why it brings me, to study Imam Sarakhsi. Imam Sarakhsi's full name actually Abu Bakar Muhammad ibn Abisal al-Sarakhsi. He lived actually during the time of Imam Ghazali, during the 5th and 11th century. He also lived, during that time, other great imams, for example, Rahib al-Isfahani. But we know from most tabaqats or most biographies, Imam Sarakhsi never encountered or met these great scholars. He, other than known as a jurist, he also known as Imam Alim, Mutakallim, Usuli, Hujjah, Munazir, debater.
And in his one other title was Shamsul A'immah. What does it mean?
Okay, Shamsul A'imah is a laqab that was given by his teacher. Shamsul A'imah means the great. Literally it means the Imam of the sons. So I think that's an honor that be given to him as a scholar in the field of Islamic law, especially in the Hanafi school of thought. So that's the laqab that actually being given by his own teacher to him. Yeah, that's the brief background about Imam Sarakhsi, Husni.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hilmi. So, based on his background, besides the al-Mabsut, which we will be talking about shortly, what are the works that al-Sarakhsi did produce in his lifetime, Dr. Hilmi?
Okay, I think before we go into the other works that al-Sarakhsi have produced, I think I would also like to to share the background of al-Mabsut, because he produced al-Mabsut because during his time in prison, he was imprisoned by the ruler of his time for almost 14 years, because he had quite long time, because he had dissenting views with the ruler during his time. And what is also interesting, he dictate the al-Mabsut, the content al-Mabsut, only by his memory only, without any.
That's fascinating.
Yes, very fascinating. And then it was reported in Tabaqat, he was imprisoned in the dungeon, and I couldn't imagine the form of the dungeon, but based on the tabaqats that we learn, we study, there were students who came to meet him, and from that moments of meeting, he dictate the content of al-Mabsut to the students, and the students jot down and write down
write them down and compile.
Correct.
Yes.
So that's the background of the works. So other than al-Mabsut, he also produced other work, for example, Usul al-Sarakhsi, Syarah al-Kabir, Sifat Syarah al-Sa'ad, Nukat Syarah al-Ziyadat, Syarah Kitab al-Nafaqat of Abu Bakar al-Qassaf, Syarah Mukhtasar al-Tahawi, Syarah Kitab al-Kasab by al-Shaybani. This latest work on commentary of al-Kasab by al-Shaybani is the most studied and printed nowadays, Husni. Even some of the books have been translated into Malay. So these are the kind of works that have ever produced by Imam Sarakhsi other than al-Mabsut.
Right, that is very interesting because we already did in the previous season an episode on Syarah Kabir by Imam al-Shaybani, Law of Nations. So thank you for pointing that one out. So maybe you can tell us more about al-Mabsut now. I understood that it is voluminous, about 30 volumes. So maybe you can give us a brief rundown of the whole of the 30 volume, Dr. Hilmi.
Thank you, Dr. Husni. I
Yes.
think the names of the book itself, al-Mabsut, speak itself. Al-Mabsut
Yeah.
is a masdar
Mm-hmm.
derived from the root word, the root word basata,
So
and
it's a verbal noun. This
it's a verbal
masdar
noun.
is a.
Yes, basata, which
All right.
means to spread out, enlarge, expand, to unfold. So when it is in the form of al-Mabsut, it means the idea that is expanded.
Ah,
So I think that's the nature of the al-Mabsut by Imam Sarakhsi.
yeah.
And then the volumes, you said just now, right? You rightly said just now, the 30 volumes. This is according to, Haji Khalifah in Kashful Zunun. He
Mhm.
mentioned that the publication of Al-Mabsut during, during his times, Kashful Zunun, written by Haji Khalifah, he lived during the 17th century. So it says that it was during that time 30 volumes with the
Mhm.
publication of it. So you can see, the voluminous and the enormous discussion that Imam Sarakhsi put in the discussion. Mainly, to expand the, the discussion of uh, Hanafi school of law, school of thought. So that's the, the nature of the work. And then Al-Mabsut itself is not a work of its own, because this is a commentary of the other works that produced before him. Mainly, Kitab al-Kafi fi al-Fiqh by Imam Hakim al-Shahid Muhammad bin Muhammad al-Hanafi al-Mawarzi.
Mhm.
Eh? So this work is also a commentary of other works by Imam Shaybani, known as al-Asl. So we can see, the development of the great works by other scholars in the past. So they build up, or they made a commentary based on their predecessors' work. So when it
Mhm.
comes to al-Mabsut, this is a thorough and extensive commentary of, the Hanafi school of thought, Hanafi mazhab. So that's why we can see enormous, volumes of works that produced by Imam Sarakhsi. So what I did in my PhD, in my master last time, I just study, the small portion of the discussion in al-Mabsut, mainly on the discussion of al-Mudarabah, or partnership in Islam. So that's, my humble contribution, to understand, to explore, to make an exposition of Imam Sarakhsi's works. Yes, Husni.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a conclusion, Dr. Hilmi, you said that prior to your PhD, you did for your research in Masters of Philosophy on this concept of partnership, is known as Mudaraba in Arabic, uh, based on your findings in the Kitab al-Mabsut. So is there anything that you would like to bring from that study to our conversation today? How is it relevant to know in this time?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Husni, for pointing me to this question. I think
Yeah.
when we study, our great scholars in the past,
Mm.
we not study for the sake of the historical value or sentiment that they had, but
Mm.
because we want to understand the insightful thinking and thought that they produce. So that's why when I studied al-Mudarabah by my al-Sarakhsi, I just want to understand the nature of the work, the Mudarabah itself, from
Yeah.
his point of view. Uh, this is something that also we can learn today, because I used to work in Islamic Bank for quite some time.
All right.
Uh, I work in the Sharia department, so we always, we want to champion, the Sharia compliance for Islamic Bank. So what we always do is to, to promote the Sharia concepts, and for example, the Mudarabah, because Mudarabah is a concept in Sharia to promote the partnership between for those who have wealth or asset, and then for those who have no wealth but they are experts on the work. So we combine, we make a partnership between these two. So today, but because we must because this is something that the Islamic Bank have been doing. They want to do great things. They want to promote Islamic Bank as alternative for the Muslims in terms of
As an alternative to the conventional banking.
Correct, you are right. But for some reason, I think we need still to understand the nature of this, the legal person, the system. And for example, the legal person is something to mean an artificial person. So now the Islamic Bank is an artificial person compared to the natural person. So that's why when we study al-Mudraba by Imam Al-Sarakhsi, we know that the concept itself was practiced individually. So meaning to say, Imam Al-Sarakhsi, he also not a writer, not a scholar, but he also a Mudrabah practitioner. What does it mean? It means we, as a Muslim, when we study the Sharia concept, we must also embrace, we must also practice the knowledge. But today, Islamic Bank, when they want to, promote, this concept, for example, Mudrabah, I think this is something that we must fill the gaps, because we try to impose that concept to the bank, to the legal person, but we ourselves as individual, do we practice the Mudrabah concept in ourselves, in our personal life? So that's why I think there is
that is a very interesting that you should point that out, Dr. Hilmi. It sounds like the situation now that we have the theory, but it's not easy to do into practice. I wonder if this is something which Imam Al-Sarakhsi himself, when you said that he practiced, he was a Mudarabah practitioner. I seem to remember that when you trace his intellectual genealogy, you come to Imam Abu Hanifa, who was known to have supported himself through, he himself being a merchant. So he had a mercantile. He was doing, some sort of trading. So are you saying that some of this theory, they are not something like what the West used to do? I mean, in terms of the ancient philosophers, Plato, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, where some of the thinking, it comes from contemplation, thinking, but some of their ethics cannot be practiced because they are divorced from reality. But in this case, it is born out of practice. They encountered some ethical or legal problems. Therefore, they thought about it and they theorized in order to solve these problems. And now, what we seem to be doing is to dig up this tradition again, see what have been done in the past, and then trying to apply to the situation now to solve some of the problems, some of the gap left to us to the present setup or conventional means of doing banking or transactions. Is that what it is?
You are absolutely right, Husni.
Yes.
We know that Imam Al-Sarakhsi and those great scholars in the past, they were not only theoretician, they were also
Yes.
practitioner. So Imam Al-Sarakhsi, we know from the history, he was also a merchant. So when he produced this al-Mudarabah or al-Mabsut, he discussed based on his experience. This is not something hypothetical. So that's why I think it's something that we could learn today, especially we involved in this, day-to-day. So for example, Islamic banking transaction. So we ourselves must embrace the spirit. Not only we enforce the concept to the other entity, but we ourselves as an individual, as a Muslims, we don't want to take any responsibility or take charge with the Sharia concept. I think that is something that we can explore later, Husni. Yes.
All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to discussion?
I would love to have prolonged discussion, but Husni, but we know the time is constrained. But inshallah, we can we can have further discussion and conversation in the future. Inshallah. Thank you
All right.
for inviting me, Dr. Husni and Sister Mas. Inshallah.
Okay. We thank you, Dr. Hilmi. So that's our discussion for today. We have discussed about al-Sarakhsi's, well, it's a superficial discussion, but nevertheless, we managed to introduce to our listeners to al-Sarakhsi's 30-volume Kitab al-Mabsut, which is a comprehensive fiqh work and also a encyclopedia. So again, we thank Dr. Hilmi for joining us for today. So next week we will have a 2 series talk, showdown. I mean, I like to put it that way, on the work Al-As'ilah wal-Ajwibah, Ibn Sina al-Biruni exchange. We're going to be bringing Dr. Muhammad Imran Mustafa Abdul Khudus to talk about the dimension of this exchange on science and metaphysics. So with that, I am Dr. Muhammad Husni Mohd Amin. You're on great works of the Muslim of the Muslim world, and we thank our producer Mazlina Ismail. So until next time, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.